Well, hello. My name is Matt Warner. I'm president of Atlas Network. We are a nonprofit based in the Washington, D.C. area, committed to supporting the strengthening of institutions of liberal democracy around the world. And it's my pleasure and honor to have an opportunity to speak with you. And I'd like to thank KEFIM for this opportunity. I'd like to just share a few thoughts about the book Poverty and Freedom and why we published it. This book represents a global effort to shift the way we approach international development and foreign aid. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, much of the developed world rallied around Francis Fukuyama's prediction that this event and the general collapse of communism marked, in his words, the end of history. By this, he meant that the ideological battle over competing forms of government was over and that liberal democracy had won. Now, it was just a matter of time before the institutions of liberal democracy would cover the globe. Fast forward to 2021, and we know better. According to Freedom House, over the last 15 years, the number of democratic countries has fallen while the number of undemocratic countries has risen. What can account for this? Well, in their recent book, The Light That Failed, Why the West is Losing the Fight for Democracy, political scientists Ivan Krastev and Stephen Holmes offer this explanation. The prevailing methods of spreading liberal democracy since the fall of the Berlin Wall have been too top-down and too outsider-led, leading to inefficacy in institution building and native resentment. This leaves local populations vulnerable to strongman promises to reassert native identities and reclaim the dignity of self-determination. Of course, this alternative is an empty promise. The lesson to learn from the past 30 years is not that illiberalism is superior to liberalism, but that liberalism by its very nature is better strengthened by local initiatives. There is a practical reason for this. The sociologist W. Richard Scott, who wrote the seminal text on institutions and institutional change, explains that successful institutions are both the cause and effect of the people they govern. That is, they are idiosyncratic to the particular time, place, and people they are meant to serve. In this way, copycat versions of other nations' liberal institutions are unlikely to function as hoped. It helps to remember that institutions are more than just the explicit legal forms we articulate in governing documents. They are also inclusive of the informal norms, beliefs, values, and culture where they function. No wonder foreign technocrats are ill-equipped to successfully design liberal institutions on behalf of local populations. What does all of this have to do with poverty reduction? Well, the economic historian Deirdre McCluskey has explained that the great enrichment of the last 200 or so years, that is, the unprecedented 3,000% increase in our standard of living, came about fundamentally because of a shift in the way we thought about the role and value of every individual in society. Only when we redefine the term human dignity from a classist designation of noble rank to an inherent moral worth and prerogative for every individual to pave their own way in life did we achieve the kind of decentralized, accelerated approach to social problem solving. This is where innovation emerged most forcefully and where wealth really took off. By recognizing that every individual has some store of knowledge, whether tacit or articulated, about their own life, their preferences, the opportunities that appeal to them, we successfully avail ourselves as a society to the value created by that knowledge in our generalized pursuit of human flourishing. What that means is that the smartest and most knowledgeable economist, urban planner, or agrarian specialist will always fall short of adequate knowledge for the task of solving problems of economic and social complexity at large scale. Let me give you an example. The Millennium Villages project led by Jeffrey Sachs was a $300 million effort to solve poverty in Africa. The strategy was simple: solve multiple problems of poverty at once in order to jumpstart economic success and release local communities from the so-called poverty trap. Investments in education, infrastructure, agriculture, and public health were launched in the hope that in solving all the symptoms of poverty, we could achieve the end of poverty. It didn't work. After 10 years, the United Kingdom's Department for International Development, now part of the Foreign Office, released an assessment of the project concluding that there was no evidence anyone escaped poverty long term, and that what was achieved could likely have been done at lower cost. One specific example from the project, in Rahira, Uganda, project researchers urged local farmers to switch from growing bananas to growing corn, promising that higher crop yields would provide better returns. They gave the villagers $300,000 to make the switch, which they did, and sure enough, there was a bountiful harvest of corn. The problem was there was nowhere to sell the excess corn and nowhere to store it, so it rotted, and the village was soon plagued by a rat infestation. This story is unfortunately not unusual. These outsider-led solutions tend to be painfully linear and simplistic in their design, and they're often ill-fit for the complexities of a particular place. Rather than tackle the symptoms of poverty, we should be focused on the institutions that lead to its widespread reduction. The role of institutions then is, as the Nobel Prize winner Amartya Sen has said, is to remove the unfreedoms that limit this decentralized, uncoordinated experimentation, and to keep them at bay. What we now know is that the task of removing unfreedoms is best done from the inside out, not the outside in. Meaning local champions of liberal institutions are best positioned to lead the charge with their own vision for change and with their local knowledge of culture, values, existing institutions, and history. I believe outsiders can continue to be supportive and make a difference, but in a more constrained and strategic way. First, outsiders can certainly continue philanthropic support for local efforts to advance the institutions of liberalism, whether that is strengthening property rights, opening formal markets to micro-enterprise, etc. But outsiders should take care not to impose their own vision for change or the conditions or terms of their own grant giving at the expense of local vision. It is local vision we want to support. And number two, an appreciation for local insights and prerogatives is not a denial of the importance of global idea sharing and cross-pollination. Such accelerated interconnectedness is how innovation is likewise accelerated, as Matt Ridley explains in his recent book, How Innovation Works and Why It Flourishes in Freedom. The key is to recognize the prerogative of locals to determine which ideas to adopt and how. In summary, poverty reduction is the result of innovation, and innovation is the result of experimentation. And experimentation at the pace that we need it to solve poverty requires a landscape of boundless opportunity to tinker freely. It requires freedom. Our task and opportunity is to support institutional change in the direction of increased freedom, and we now know it is better to prioritize locally led change in keeping with the spirit of liberal democracy and its promise of true self-determination. In the book Poverty and Freedom, you'll find more essays explaining this topic further and in more in depth, as well as inspiring case studies from local champions of liberal democracy, showing their successes in removing unfreedoms for all people. Thank you very much.